Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Because I Have Thoughts. I'm Dr. T, and today we're going to continue the conversation about identity. Been having such great discussions about identity, our journey towards identity, how we decide, how our identity is influenced and impacted, how we established our identity, and the journey towards finding our truest identity. Last episode, we had the pleasure of having that conversation with Jennifer Edwards, who talked about our children and how our children's identities are formed. As a specialist in early childhood development and family ministry, she just gave her excellent opinion on how we can help our children establish their identity, find their identity, and develop their identity, especially through Christ. So thank you, Jen, and thank you for everyone who enjoyed that conversation. We got lots of views on that conversation, so maybe we'll have Jen back. Who knows? Today, we're going to continue the conversation, but we're going to talk about what are political views and how they influence our identity. Since we have an election coming up, a very important one, I know you guys have been getting all of the information. I mean, I am getting text messages, junk mail, commercials, just bombarded with so much information about this particular election, and just seeing everybody's responses and how this election is impacting who they are, how they represent themselves, how they show up in the world. So yeah, we're gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna share my political views with you all because for me that is private and my personal opinion. But I will share my thoughts on my personal experience and in this process and living as an American and being able to exercise my vote to participate in this democracy. How about that? So what sparked this conversation was a little bit, I've been talking about my dissertation and how my dissertation addressed some of the influences in the world, and the election and our political views is part of pop culture now. It didn't really used to be, but now it is. So I entertained that when I was doing my research and completing my dissertation. That's one reason that we're having this conversation. And additionally, I was having a conversation or had an experience that made me want to talk about this today. And not to mention, it's election time, right? So why not talk about it? And because I have thoughts. Y'all know I'm crazy. But anyway, so you guys know, people that have, follow me on social media platforms, or you have engaged with me at different events or opportunities, or you've worked with me, or even if you're a student of mine or a resident of mine, however you know me, you probably know that I'm a writer. So my hair is such a distraction, y'all. Like, I'm just not used to having my hair down. I like a tight bun because then I don't have to be conscious of my hair. Anyway, so I am a writer. Lots of you know that I'm a writer, and I participate in a lot of writing groups, literary activities, conferences, things like that. So one of the particular groups that I'm in, we meet monthly. It's a critique group. And if you don't know what a writer's critique group is, what it is a whole bunch of writers get together who are working on projects, and you critique each other's work and give each other feedback, help each other develop your story, whatever you're writing. It's camaraderie, it's community, it's all of the things. Okay. So this particular group, I'm in several critique groups, and this particular one, we meet monthly. And you're supposed to come and bring what you've been working on, no matter the genre. It could be fiction, nonfiction. It could be mystery. It could be anything. It could be a screenplay. It could be anything. They don't have any particular parameters about what you bring. So other groups will specify, like, we're only critiquing fiction work, or we're only critiquing nonfiction. So you want to be sure that you're in a group that is for your particular genre. But this particular group, anyway, is open. So you can bring anything. So it was our monthly meeting, and people were sharing. There is a man in this group. He is more seasoned than I am, and he always shares like war stories and things like that. He writes about things from like the 50s, the 40s and the 50s, maybe the 40s, I don't know, 50s and the 60s, probably the 50s and the 60s. Yeah, the 50s and the 60s. So he's writing about that time period, which is before my time. I wasn't even born. My mama was born then, I wasn't. But anyway, those are the things that he writes about. And in this particular group, I just want to specify, I am the only Black female in this group. Which is the story of my life, y'all. It just is. But in this particular group, I am the only Black female. But this man is majority race, and he usually writes about war times and the 50s and, those types of things. So he was sharing this story that really made me want to do this episode. He was writing about how he was struggling financially, and he decided to have a yard sale, which was huge in his community, that he was like, older people like yard sales. It gives them something to do. I don't know that, but that was his part of the story, that he was telling the story. And he was like, he had a goal that he set at the yard sale, that he wanted to acquire so much money from his yard sale. So he didn't meet the goal. And he was saying that he had the yard sale because he really needed money to pay some bills and to buy some groceries. So when he didn't meet his goal, he went to his church, and his friends at church were like, hey, did you meet your goal? Like, what happened? How did your yard sale go? You know how we do, how we do as a community. We follow up with one another if you're in a good community. So in that, he was like, a young lady reached out to him privately, like through email or something, not necessarily at his church. And she was like, hey, I want to bless you with this amount of money to help you because you didn't make all of the money. I think his goal was like $500 for the yard sale. And I think he made like $50. Let's just say those are the numbers. So this young lady emails him and says, hey, like I can't give you $500, but I can give you 50% of what you would have acquired. So $250. He says he has to think about it. Now, mind you, he's having a yard sale because he needs the money, and he only made 10% of his goal at the yard sale. And someone reaches out to him to offer him 50% of what he was intending to make at the yard sale. His bills still due. He still need groceries. So he still needs the money. And he tells the young lady that he has to think about it. The reason why he tells her that he has to think about it is because he says that she has different political views than him. Yeah, let that sink in, y'all. I am sitting in my writing group listening to this story, and it is mind-boggling to me. You don't have any groceries, you need bills paid, and someone is offering to help you. And because they have a different political views than you, you don't want to take their blessing. Yeah, that just sounded a little crazy to me. So he continues with the story, and eventually someone gives him the total amount. He takes that money because those people agree with his political views. And I just thought to myself, I was intrigued by this whole story, intrigued by the fact that your political views are so strong that you would not take help from someone who has opposing political views than you. That's just mind-boggling to me. So that just led me to think about these conversations that we've been having with regards to identity. His identity was influencing him so much to his detriment, because here was someone trying to help him, and just because that person had different political views than him, he was not willing to take the money from this young woman. I couldn't even wrap my head around that. The fact that she was willing to help him, even though they didn't have the same political views, to me speaks to how we're supposed to operate and how we're supposed to exist, that our differences shouldn't necessarily separate us, and our differences shouldn't keep us from helping one another and reaching out to one another. It shouldn't be at the sacrifice of our humanity. Yet he was completely closed off and could not receive help from this woman just because she had a different political view than him. And I don't know which side of the fence either one of them sit on. I just thought it was so crazy. And that's just my personal opinion. Those are just my thoughts of how crazy it is that he would not take, let's call it a handout, from this young woman just because she had different political views than him. Which made me think about like people who accept charity, whether it's from like the Salvation Army or the Goodwill or Helping Hands, or Easter Seals. Like those are all organizations that I personally donate to. And I'm just wondering if people on the other end knew my political views, would they opt not to receive what I've been donating because of my political? The whole thing is just crazy to me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh. He stands firm on his convictions with regards to the political party that he associates with. I just found the whole thing mind-boggling. And when those things happen, I can't help but to laugh. Maybe it's a nervous laugh. I don't know. But I mean, think about that. I want you guys to really think about the fact that this man was unwilling to take help from a young woman based on political views. His political views were so heavily influenced or ingrained in him and his identity that he was unwilling to take help. So that's one situation that made me think about how our political views impact who we are and influence our identity. The other situation that made me have that thought was an experience I had in undergrad. In undergrad, I was my major was journalism and promotional communications, which meant that I got a seat on the campus publication. I was also the features editor for the campus magazine. So I had two jobs on campus. I wrote for the campus newspaper and I was the features editor for the campus magazine. That came with so many strings, people. Of course it did. So, I mean, there were great benefits to that, but there were also some challenges because it came with a scholarship. And I needed the money. I needed the money because nobody else paid for my education but me. So I needed the money. I needed that scholarship money. It also came with a stipend. Again, I needed the money. This was a monthly stipend that they gave us because you may have needed to attend an event which required you to pay for parking and put gas in your car, or you may have had to cover I don't know, an event that required you to pay for food, or an event that required you to pay for food. So you needed money for that. So they just gave us a monthly stipend for that. I cannot tell you what I spent mine on. But anyway, during that time, I was assigned to cover all of the like political things that were happening in anything legal, political, in that realm. I was assigned to cover that. It would be called the law beat. So every area that you had to cover as a journalist was called a beat, and I was in charge of the law beat. So I had to cover everything that happened at the law school, anything that happened in the city with like the mayor or anything like that. I was required to cover all of those stories. So much so that I had the pleasure of actually being in the room with, at that time, Senator Obama and former First Lady Hillary Clinton. They had come to the city that I was going to school in for an event, and they were literally like, I don't know, 20 feet away from me in a room filled with people. I could see them from far away. I never really got to interact with them, but it just was great to be in that moment. And I was chosen to go to that event to represent the paper, and I had to write a story about it. So that just gives you an idea of the stuff that I had to cover. So of course, after that event, he then announced his candidacy. So as the journalist covering the law beat, it was my job to write about this upcoming election with this very prevalent Black men running for the presidency. And of course, we've had Black candidates before. We had Jesse Jackson, we had Shirley Chisholm, but this just reigned differently as a Black candidate, Barack Obama being a presidential candidate. So they wanted me to write a story. However, they wanted me to write a story from an imposing view in relation to my race. And again, I didn't really have a choice, y'all, because a girl needed the money. Wasn't nobody paying for my education but me. I had to do it because, you know, again, I'm on scholarship. I needed the scholarship and I needed my monthly stipend. So the name of the article was called I Am Red, and I had to write from the perspective of a Black Republican, which is a rare thing. There are Black Republicans out there, but it's a rare thing. If you know anything, you know that the Black community usually aligns and associates themselves with the Democratic Party. This causes a conflict within the Black community when Black Republicans are like, yeah, I don't roll with the Democrats. I just don't. So if you identify anything other than what the Black community deems to be appropriate, you lose your proverbial Black card. I don't know why I'm laughing. I mean, I guess because all of this is so crazy to me, that our identity is wrapped up into so many things that don't concretely define us as people, yet we are held to standards because of those ideas and because of those practices, whether we agree with them or not. We're not allowed to be individuals and have individualized identities outside of what the popular norm says it should be. So in writing this article, I did feel slightly alienated from some of my Black classmates and Black peers that were in the communications department, but I didn't really have a choice. And one of the things I'm very grateful for is in writing that article, this was like right before the huge explosion of social media. If you guys can recall, Barack was I think the first president where they had to really deal with the social media aspect of the presidency. So this article that I wrote was before the whole explosion of what we see the internet and social media to be today. Thank the Lord. I do have a physical copy of it, but I don't think that it is digitally available anywhere, which I thank God for. But anywho, that whole process just had me thinking about how we identify with political parties, political leaders, and how ingrained it can be in our identity. And, you know, how did that come about? Do you associate with the Democratic Party because you are Black? Do you know what all of the policies are that the Democratic Party stands for? And do you agree with those? Or do you just say, well, my grandmother was a Democrat, my cousin is, my aunt is, so, and I'm Black, so I got to be a Democrat? Do you? And not that I stand with any side firmly, like I am not 10 toes down with anybody but Jesus, okay? But I'm just saying, really think about how you associate with the political parties and the political leaders and the candidates moving forward. I mean, as this election approaches, on Tuesday, November 5th. Really think about, are you voting based on your belief systems and how you identify? Or are you succumbing to outside pressures and influences that have been dictating how you participate in the political process, in the democratic process? And we really need to ask ourselves some of the hard questions. I mean, one of my neighbors has his house completely wrapped. And I mean wrapped. I live in the South, so he has the traditional I guess plantation like porch, and wrapped. The entire porch is wrapped. He's got flags galore. He's got signage across almost his full front acre of land for one particular party and one particular candidate. And I speak to him, but as I'm leaving my house in the morning or whenever, I have this same thought every day, like, that person that you're supporting so heavily doesn't even know you alive. They don't know your name. They don't know where you live. They don't know what your plight is and what you actually need from your government. But you have spent what looks like thousands of dollars to portray an identity that is related to and in support of this particular party and this particular political figure. It's mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling to me how people take such strong stance on political position, or take such strong stance on and political positions on things that they're completely detached from. I also wonder about those people who have such strong opinions and strong perspectives. Do they vote in the small elections? Because those are the elections that matter, the ones that happen in your particular municipality, for your judges. Do you vote for your senators, are you voting in those elections? Because those elections matter as it applies to the to the presidential election. I'm just saying, think about that. And are you assigned to a certain party because of your peers, because of the community that you associate with? There's so many reasons for us to evaluate our identity. And I don't usually participate in the conversation surrounding the political parties and our political views. I just don't get involved. I feel like that is such a private thought and a private decision that it doesn't need to be publicized on such a grand scale. I actually would like for us to return to the time when everything about how you voted was private. I remember going to the voting booths with my mom as a kid, and it was so secretive. Like, you went into a booth, it had a full curtain. Couldn't nobody see what was on your card. Couldn't nobody see what you were voting, who you were voting on, what you were voting yes on, what you were voting no on. No one could see anything. Not like these little small, not so private cubbies that they have nowadays. I mean, this was a full-blown voting booth. I feel like we need to go back to that. I really do. Because the political conversation is so divisive, and so many people are alienated and have so much anger and frustration and hostility towards each other based on the differences between us as it applies to the political race and the political parties and the political figures. Something has got to change. It has to change. It has to change. And I respect the fact that no one agrees. Well, you know what? I can't even say that statement. I was going to say that no one agrees 100% with either candidate, but I don't know that to be true. I know I don't agree 100% with either candidate because there's so many holes in their ideas and their perspectives on certain policies that no, I can't agree with you 100% either way. Nonetheless, there has to be some common ground where we can come together and coexist. We have to. We all share an entire country. Like, I'm not getting ready to curse out my neighbor because he has taken a very public stance on which side he's on. And as I said, when I see him and I go out, I wave. Hey, how you doing? Nonetheless, you have people that we have cancel culture where people will be like, oh, you don't agree with me politically? Then we're done. Just like the man in my writing group who took a declarative stance on not accepting money or accepting help from that young lady just because she had a difference in her political views. It's crazy to me how people will shop at stores, buy products that they don't 100% agree with and not complain about it, but they will not vote for a particular candidate because they don't 100% agree with that person. I mean, people shop at Walmart and they don't 100% agree with Walmart's policies or prices, but they still shop there. Same for Target. I hear people in those stores all the time complaining, this is so expensive. This is too much money, but you still go there and shop. It's so crazy to me where people draw the line on things. And I respect the fact that that a political or a presidential race is more complicated than the simplification of what detergent I'm going to buy at which store and what the price is. However, I do think that we've come to a point where it's dictating our identity so much that we are completely disconnected to who we are and how we can all coexist in our differences. Okay, I've been talking a long time about this and I could go on longer, but the last point that I wanted to make was that what brought upon this part of the conversation was, I don't know why I'm having a little cotton mouth today. I don't know why. But anyway, another point or another reason why I wanted to talk about how our political views impacts our identity is the book written by Dr. Eric Mason, which you guys, I think I've talked about Dr. Eric Mason several times during each episode in this discussion of identity because he just has been talking about it so much from several different platforms that it's just right in the wheelhouse of this conversation. So he recently wrote a book called Woke Church. He has many great books. I mean, many great books. One of the books that I love is Manhood Restored. I feel like every man should read that book. But the book we're talking about today is called Woke Church. And again, it's Woke Church by Dr. Eric Mason. And he talks about how the church and Christianity has done a disservice to the concept, the idea, and the practice of justice. And I agree with that. He talks about how churches will stand very strongly on a political party or a political view, and it doesn't align with the Bible and God's perspective on that particular policy or practice or view. And I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had. Preston Perry also entertains this conversation in his book, in his most recent book, which I don't have the title in front of me right now. I think it's called How to Tell the Truth. I'll put it in the description and in the comments, or I'll put a graphic up of it right now. I don't have it in front of me. But he also addresses how we don't even see people anymore. We just see their political views. And if I had just moved into this neighborhood and my neighbor already had that paraphernalia up in his yard, I probably, thinking about it, may have been hesitant to engage him based on his political views. If I'm honest, if I'm, I don't want to say honest because I'm honest. If I was transparent about that particular scenario, I think I may have been hesitant if his house was already wrapped and I had just moved in. Even being a Christian, I probably would have approached him, if I approached him at all, very cautiously. So I think that there's something to be said about the preconceived notions that we have associated with each political party and political candidate as it applies to our identity. Like, is that how you want to present yourself to the world? I guess so, if you wrap in your house with it. I'm not wrapping my house with no political party stuff. Anywho, I'm sorry, I'm cracking myself up. Let me stay on topic. But I appreciate Dr. Mason's perspective as it applies to the church and Christianity, because so many churches take a stance on the political conversation, and I don't think they should. I really don't. And you know, I may get some backlash for this, but I don't really think they should. I remember maybe in high school, or maybe I was in undergrad. I can't remember. I think I was in high school and being at my childhood church. And I remember a couple of politicians coming and asking to talk across the it was called the pulpit. Now they call them platforms, you know, the stage, talking about their policies across the pulpit and influencing vote. And that was a common practice. If you study history, you study the political process. If you're intrigued by that, that was a common practice that politicians would come to churches and speak to the congregations about how they should vote. Nowadays, they don't even have to come, because preachers are just spewing it across their pulpits and encouraging people about who they should and should not vote for. And I just don't think but for me, that's between you and God. I wonder how many people, how many Christians who profess to be Christians actually pray about the issues on the ballot, the candidates on the ballot, and which way God wants them to vote. I know I do. First of all, me and my son sit down and I go through with him the issues that are on the ballot and the candidates on the ballot. We talk about the issues. We talk about what's going to impact our home, what's going to impact us, what's important to us. I give him room to disagree with me. I don't want y'all to think I'm that kind of mom where I'm like, you got to agree with me. I'm not that person. If he has opposing views, I do ask him to explain his viewpoint to me, and I then explain mine to him, because he may be like, well, why you feel that way? So I think that that's how it needs to be done, that there needs to be open discussion, open dialogue. And if you are a Christian, a person who practices Christianity and has a relationship with Christ, you need to be praying about who you should vote for, and not because your pastor said you need to vote for this particular candidate. You need to have your own relationship with Christ and vote according to what God tells you to, who God tells you to vote for. So I know I said a mouthful. One, read that book by Dr. Eric Mason called Woke Church. It is enlightening, especially if you are a Christian and you're a believer. If you're not a Christian or believer, read that book, and you will get a better understanding about how we should engage and how we should participate in the political process, especially as a believer. And before I go, another quote that I wanted to talk about is in Priscilla Shirer's book, which we talked about Priscilla Shirer's book on the last episode with Jen Edwards. But this quote is, "We just need a heart and a mind consistent with our identity." Thinking about that. I'm going to put that quote up, probably in a graphic, maybe scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Y'all know how I do. I'm simple. But she says that we just need a heart and mind consistent with our identity. And when she talks about, she's talking about who God created us to be in relation to our identity in Christ. So as you're going to the polls on November 5th, or if you're early voting like me, I early vote. I like to avoid all of the hustle and bustle. Sometimes I like to be in the hustle and bustle, but this is my first year voting in the state that I'm currently live in. So I will be early voting. I need to get there early. But when you go to cast your vote, think about your own personal identity. And I say, do your due diligence, do your research, do a quick Google search, go to official sites though, like gov.gov sites, not some random site of a blogger. Look for official information about, a lot of news sites will have links to the actual issues that are on the ballot. They will have links to the candidates' records and how their policies. So do your due diligence as you take yourself to the poll, and think about your own personal identity and not who the world or someone else has asked you to show up and be. As we're on this journey of identity, I always ask you to do a self-check with regards to the topic at hand. Since this is such a huge issue and it impacts us as we live as citizens in this country, please do your due diligence. Please go online, search the issues, search the policies, search the candidates, and see what most aligns with your belief system. Know what you're voting for. Know the person's policies that you're voting for. I feel like this has been a heavy topic. I also feel like I've giggled through the whole thing because I just find some of it so funny. Things that don't make sense to me, things that are irrational to me, I tend to laugh about because I tend to be a more logical and analytical person. I took the IQ test, and my analytical critical thinking score was 99%. So when things are illogical and I've analyzed them, and it seems irrational, I can't help but laugh. I'm sorry, y'all. Nevertheless, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation about identity as it relates to our political views and the upcoming election. I hope that you will do your due diligence and not just vote based on someone else's influence, but if you're a Christian, I'm hoping and praying that you prayed before you made the decision to vote on November 5th, or if you early vote. I hope you prayed, and I hope you will pray as we are in some interesting times. And as Dr. Eric Mason has so eloquently communicated, we are in a time where identity crisis is at an all-time high, where we don't know who we are. We are completely disconnected to who we are. And I found that same notion from my own research. Get connected to your truest self, so we can get better, grow better, and become a greater part of our community that is more conducive to emotional health, emotional wellness. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. I feel like I've been talking for a long time about this particular topic. I have 2 more stories to tell, but I've been talking long enough. I thank you all for tuning in and listening to me ramble about identity as it applies to our political views and political candidates and how that influences who we are. Please, please, please like, follow, and subscribe. And as always, I thank you all so much for spending time with me. You all know that I believe that time is the rarest commodity that we have. So I thank you for sacrificing and sharing some time with me. And please like, follow, and subscribe. This has been another episode of Because I Have Thoughts. I'm Dr. T. Peace.